Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes: who is Mike Johnson? New House Speaker is a strong Trump ally and a quiet force among Republicans. Federal officials say plan for water cuts from 3 western states is enough to protect Colorado River. Opinion: why Mike Johnson winning the speakership is a loss for the country. U.S. seeks delay in Gaza ground invasion to put air defenses in place. Anywhere we go, war is following us. Those who fled Ukraine face a new conflict zone in Israel. Who is Mike Johnson? New House Speaker is a strong Trump ally and a quiet force among Republicans. The Toronto Star. Mike Johnson, a low-key U.S. congressman from Louisiana, has been elected as the new Speaker of the House. Johnson, a social conservative and staunch ally of former President Donald Trump, was able to secure the support of all 220 Republican members of the House. His election followed 3 weeks of infighting among Republicans over the selection of a replacement for Kevin McCarthy, who was ousted as Speaker. Johnson, who describes himself as a servant, is expected to bring unity to the Republican caucus and help the party move past divisions that have plagued it in recent years. However, it remains to be seen how well he will be able to unite the party and gain the trust of Democrats, particularly in light of his socially conservative views and support for Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Johnson is the first Louisianan to hold the position of Speaker, and the first Southerner to do so since Republican Newt Gingrich in the 1990s. Federal officials say plan for water cuts from 3 western states is enough to protect Colorado River. The Toronto Star. Federal officials have stated that the conditions on the Colorado River have improved enough to reduce the risk of critically low water levels in the river's key reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The announcement comes after California, Arizona, and Nevada proposed a voluntary plan to reduce water use in order to stabilize the river basin. The plan involves conserving an additional 3 million acre-feet of water through 2026 in exchange for $1.2 billion in federal funding. The federal government is expected to officially accept the plan, indicating a shift towards collaboration rather than conflict in managing the river's water. Opinion: why Mike Johnson winning the speakership is a loss for the country. CNN. House Republicans finally picked a Speaker of the House when GOP members coalesced around Louisiana Representative Mike Johnson on Wednesday afternoon. With this decision, MAGA wins again. U.S. seeks delay in Gaza ground invasion to put air defenses in place. New York Times. The Biden administration has asked Israel to delay a ground invasion of Gaza in order to give the U.S. more time to put air defense batteries and other military assets in place to protect American troops. U.S. officials have been pushing for a delay in order to negotiate the release of hostages, allow more aid into the region, and potentially move the Israeli military away from a grinding urban fight. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has held off on a land invasion since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7. Anywhere we go, war is following us. Those who fled Ukraine face a new conflict zone in Israel. The Globe and Mail. Jewish Ukrainian children who were evacuated to Israel from Ukraine due to the Russian invasion in February 2022 have once again been forced to flee due to the attacks by Hamas in southern Israel. The children, aged between 7 and 18, spent hours in a bomb shelter before being moved to a youth facility outside of Tel Aviv. They are now receiving group treatment to cope with the trauma they have experienced over the past 2 years. Many Jewish people have fled Ukraine and Russia to seek safety in Israel, with a 5-fold increase in immigration to the country from these regions due to the war. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been disappointed with the lack of support from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has prioritized good relations with the Kremlin and the neighboring Syrian government. Yellen says community banking investments boost lending to Black, Latino firms sharply. Reuters. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has announced that $8.5 billion in COVID-era investments in community development financial institutions and minority-owned banking firms will boost lending to Black and Latino communities by nearly $140 billion over a decade. The investment program, known as the Emergency Capital Investment Program, ECIP, has already shown promising results, with 1/3 of total loans made to the hardest-to-serve borrowers. Yellen expects the program to result in nearly $80 billion in increased lending in Black communities and nearly $58 billion in Latino communities over the next decade. The Treasury has also set a goal to attract $3 billion in deposits to community development financial institutions and minority-owned banking institutions to help meet these lending targets. White House wants more than $23 billion from Congress to respond to natural disasters. The Independent. The White House is requesting over $23 billion in emergency funding from lawmakers to respond to natural disasters that have occurred in the U.S. this year. The request includes investments in child care programs and broadband expansion, and is in addition to the $106 billion request for aid to Ukraine and Israel as well as other national security priorities. The funding would be allocated to the Federal Emergency Management Agency and other federal agencies to cover housing, transportation, and agriculture needs. President Joe Biden has expressed his commitment to supporting recovery efforts and rebuilding communities affected by natural disasters. The largest portion of the funding request is $9 billion for FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund, followed by $2.8 billion for the Department of Housing and Urban Development and $2.8 billion for aid through the Department of Agriculture. The funding would also be used to repair roads, assist schools in disaster-hit areas, and provide loans for small businesses in affected communities. Biden emphasizes need for Palestinian state after Israel-Gaza war. Washington Post. President Biden has called for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and emphasized the need for Israel to minimize civilian casualties in Gaza. Biden condemned Israeli settlers for attacking Palestinians in the West Bank and called for them to be held accountable. His comments come as Israel is expected to launch a ground invasion of Gaza, and in response to pressure from Arab leaders and members of his own party to address the devastation in the region. Biden also expressed skepticism about the number of civilian deaths reported by the Palestinian Health Ministry. Politico, White House sells Ukraine aid as economic boon at home. Yahoo! The Biden administration has been quietly urging lawmakers from both political parties to highlight the domestic economic benefits of supporting Ukraine, according to Politico. The White House has asked sympathetic lawmakers to present military support for Kyiv as a way to create jobs in America, the report said. The move comes as President Biden seeks to win congressional approval for his $106 billion foreign aid funding package, which includes over $61 billion for Ukraine. White House dinner for Australia offers comfort food, instrumental tunes in nod to Israel-Hamas war. The Independent. The White House has made a few adjustments to the entertainment at a state dinner honoring Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, in light of the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. The B-52s, an American new wave band, had initially been lined up to perform, but their music has been replaced with instrumental tunes from U.S. military bands. First Lady Jill Biden said the changes were made when so many are facing sorrow and pain. The dinner will feature a menu of comforting food, and will be held in a temporary pavilion on the White House lawn, with decorations inspired by Australian spring and American autumn. Deal will get done despite jitters in Congress, Biden tells Australian PM at White House meeting. The Guardian. U.S. President Joe Biden has reassured Chinese President Xi Jinping that the AUKUS submarine deal is not aimed at surrounding China, while calling on Congress to pass legislation supporting the deal. Speaking during a press conference with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House, Biden said that the AUKUS partnership between the US, UK, and Australia aims to ensure that sea lanes remain open and that China does not unilaterally change the rules of international airspace and water. Biden also revealed that he and Albanese had discussed a range of topics, including space cooperation, climate action, and the Israel-Hamas conflict. The two leaders called on all parties to protect civilians and act in accordance with international law. The AUKUS deal has faced some opposition in Congress, with some Republicans expressing concerns that the U.S.'s own submarine needs will be compromised. Albanese, however, expressed confidence that there is broad support for the deal, and said that he regarded the U.S. as a very reliable partner. Trust but verify, Biden warns Albanese on risks of dealing with China. The Sydney Morning Herald. U.S. President Joe Biden has warned Australia about the risks of dealing with China and emphasized America's commitment to stability in Asia. Biden stated that his administration would take on China and present the U.S. as a more reliable partner in the region. He also discussed plans to heighten strategic competition with China and compete with initiatives like China's Belt and Road Initiative. Additionally, Biden sent a message to Chinese President Xi Jinping that the U.S. is committed to peace and stability in the Pacific. Biden's comments came during a press conference with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in the Rose Garden of the White House. Tennessee Attorney General sues federal government over abortion rule blocking funding. The Toronto Star. Tennessee's Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti, has filed a complaint against the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, for withholding family planning funds after the state failed to comply with federal rules requiring clinics to provide abortion referrals. Tennessee was disqualified from receiving millions of federal dollars offered through the Title X program earlier this year. Skrmetti is seeking to overturn the HHS decision and reinstate the funds. Tennessee has called for rejecting federal funding rather than complying with requirements over abortion access, LGBTQ+ rights, and other hot-button issues. Biden calls Australia an anchor to peace and prosperity during state visit from Albanese. The Toronto Star. President Joe Biden described Australia as an anchor to peace and prosperity while standing alongside Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House on Wednesday, part of a state visit intended to deepen an alliance that's increasingly viewed as a critical counterweight to China's influence in the Pacific. It was the ninth and most high-profile meeting between the two leaders, reflecting their work toward closer ties on climate change, technology, and national security. The United States also plans to provide nuclear-powered submarines to Australia in the coming years, part of a collaboration with the United Kingdom. We renewed our commitment to defend the values that are at the heart of this alliance, Biden said. We continue to stand as one to forge a better future for both of us and all of the region. The state visit, only the fourth since Biden took office, came against the backdrop of escalating fighting between Israel and Hamas. Biden began a joint press conference with Albanese by expressing concern about the violence and calling for renewed dedication toward the eventual creation of a Palestinian state. The B-52s, a rock group, were originally scheduled to perform, but they've been replaced by military bands. The scenes of celebration will be juxtaposed with the crisis in the Middle East, where Israel has increased its bombardment of the Gaza Strip in retaliation against Hamas for its October 7 attack. Hundreds of Palestinians were reported killed in a single day, and more bloodshed is expected as Israel prepares a ground invasion of the densely populated territory. Biden calls for a concentrated effort toward future two-state solution for Israel-Palestinians. Hill. President Biden has called for a concentrated effort from world leaders to work towards a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Biden had previously focused on managing the conflict rather than launching negotiations for a two-state solution. He emphasized that there can be no return to the status quo and called for a vision of what comes next after the current crisis. Biden also suggested that Hamas launched its attacks to disrupt normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. He reiterated U.S. support for an independent Palestinian state next to a secure Israel. Treasury rates jump as poor auction puts focus on November sales. Yahoo! U.S. Treasury yields rose after weak demand for a $52 billion sale of 5-year notes. The auction drew a 4.899% yield, close to 2 basis points more than was expected. Yields were already rising before the sale, helped by better-than-expected September new home sales data. The 30-year bond yield climbed by over 15 basis points to nearly 5.1%. The U.S. Treasury will announce auction size increases on November 1. Here's where Speaker Mike Johnson stands on the issues. Politico. Mike Johnson, a Louisiana lawyer, has been elected House Speaker after serving fewer than 8 years in the House. His views on abortion, food programs, climate change, and other major policy issues are being closely watched. Johnson is known for his anti-abortion stance and has co-sponsored legislation to ban abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected. He has also opposed access to gender-affirming care for children and has been critical of efforts to fight climate change. Johnson has voted against cannabis legislation, supported stricter immigration policies, and has been a critic of tech industry regulations. Israel says Gaza ground assault to come. But first is battle over risks. Washington Post. Amid ongoing violence between Israel and Hamas, many are questioning when, or if, the Israeli military will send in ground troops to Gaza. The military has promised to launch an operation large enough to destroy Hamas, but the decision is ultimately up to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and top opposition leader Benny Gantz. Netanyahu has given his strongest signal that a ground offensive will take place, stating that the cabinet and military chief of staff have determined unanimously on a timetable. However, no details on when this could occur or at what scale have been provided. The military has become more explicit that they are ready to invade, and are just waiting for the order. However, divisions have appeared between military and government officials, with some suggesting it is the military holding up the operation. There are significant risks to launching a ground invasion, including the possibility of regional conflict with Hamas allies such as Iran, and the world is watching Israel's next move carefully, including the U.S. A pilot had been told to wait to take off before planes collided on Houston runway, NTSB says. The Toronto Star. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, has reported a collision between a twin-engine Hawker aircraft and a twin-engine Cessna at William P. Hobby Airport in Houston. The incident occurred when the Hawker was instructed to line up and wait for takeoff, but instead started rolling on the runway and struck the tail of the Cessna, which had just landed. There were no injuries reported among the 8 people on board the 2 planes. The NTSB has sent a team of investigators to the airport and expects to release a preliminary report on the collision within 30 days. The Biden administration has recently announced plans to invest $26 million in new safety measures to address similar incidents at airports. Albanese presses protecting every innocent life as war overshadows White House talks. ABC. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has praised U.S. President Joe Biden's support for Israel while highlighting the need to protect civilians in Gaza during a visit to the White House. The visit has been overshadowed by the Middle East conflict and congressional disarray in the U.S. Israel has reportedly agreed to delay a ground invasion of Gaza so that American missile defenses can be sent to the region. The AUKUS agreement, under which Australia will acquire American nuclear-powered submarines, was also discussed. The 2 leaders also announced plans for infrastructure development in the Pacific to counter Chinese influence. Well folks, it's been quite a news day, hasn't it? I'm Mike Johnson, your friendly neighborhood observer from the 6 Degrees. And let me tell you, there's never a dull moment in this crazy world of ours. Today we've got stories ranging from politics to international conflicts and everything in between. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's dive in. First up, we have the election of Mike Johnson as the new Speaker of the House. Now, I know what you're thinking, who is Mike Johnson? Well, he's a low-key congressman from Louisiana, a social conservative, and a strong ally of former President Donald Trump. He's expected to bring unity to the Republican caucus, but whether he can gain the trust of Democrats remains to be seen. Personally, I think it's going to be quite the challenge for him, given his socially conservative views and support for Trump's election overturn efforts. But hey, stranger things have happened in politics. In other news, federal officials are saying that a plan to reduce water use in the Colorado River Basin is enough to protect the river's key reservoirs. This is great news for the region, as it shows a shift towards collaboration in managing water resources. It's a reminder that sometimes, working together is the best way to tackle a problem. Now, let's talk about the situation in Gaza. The Biden administration has asked Israel to delay a ground invasion in order to protect American troops. This is a smart move, as it gives the U.S. more time to put defenses in place and negotiate the release of hostages. It also shows that Biden is committed to finding a peaceful solution to the conflict, which is something we can all get behind. Speaking of conflicts, Ukrainian children who were evacuated to Israel from Ukraine are once again facing a new conflict zone. It's heartbreaking to see these children, who have already been through so much, forced to flee once again. It's a reminder that war has far-reaching consequences, and that we need to do everything we can to prevent it. On a brighter note, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has announced that investments in community banking will boost lending to Black and Latino communities. This is a great step towards addressing systemic inequalities and promoting economic growth. It's a reminder that small actions can have big impacts. And finally, the White House is requesting billions of dollars from Congress to respond to natural disasters. This is an important move to support communities affected by these disasters and help them rebuild. It's a reminder that we need to take care of each other, especially in times of crisis. So there you have it, folks, a snapshot of the news from today. I hope you found it informative and maybe even a little entertaining. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions? Let's start a conversation and see where it takes us. After all, that's what the 6 Degrees is all about, connecting with each other and sharing our ideas. So don't be shy, speak up and let me know what's on your mind. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the 6 Degrees. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.